Hi, this is Vaughan in Nova Scotia. This is Tuesday, New Year's Eve. Um, I've been recycling this clay now since Saturday, so it's in the fourth day, and this whole table was full when I set it up on Saturday, and since then I've been cutting each piece down in half and banging it smooth again just so it's a smaller piece but more exposed areas for drying. And I've done about 2/3 of it at the moment, maybe 3/4. So by the end of today I'm hoping that most of it will be gone. And sometime maybe tomorrow or Thursday I will end up pugging this clay. So I'm just giving you a quick update here. There's my little cutting tool, the harp on the right. Basically, cut it up in half, and it makes it dry a little faster each time. And I just pound it a little bit so the wet stuff comes out from the inside to the outside, and then it'll dry, hopefully. This is the fourth day. I'm going to throw some teapots. So it's a stormy day, no rain or snow yet, but the weather is actually supposed to bring us some freezing rain and snow. That's a little village called Riverport in the distance. It's about a mile and a half in the distance across the bay, and but it is a stormy day. Winds are supposed to be 70 to 80 kilometers today, so all right, let's put this up. Set it up so you can see easily. I'll plug in my other microphone. Hear what I'm saying? Yeah, that's about right, I guess. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing and I won't be the headless potter again, but there you go. Alright, this is the Shimpo Whisper I'm going to throw on today. Alright, so teapots. Well, maybe I should give you a quick demo on a mug first, because I'm trying to make this so that it's suitable for beginners as well as more advanced. If you haven't watched any videos before, we're in Nova Scotia, which is the northeastern edge of Canada. And after you pass us, it's Cape Breton, and then you're off up to Newfoundland. So we get a mild climate. Everybody thinks it's really super cold here, but it's no worse than Maine. Alright. Get my tools wet before I start there. So centering, basically, left arm solidly on the splash pan, press down with your top hand, press in with your left hand. The wheel's going about 2/3 full speed. Press in, press down, move it around a little bit. You're basically just trying to center the clay and make sure it's got a good consistency, which this is brand new, so it should be perfect. Fingertips, fingers here, supporting, press down, pull out. It's drying, so let go slowly. And then I always push my finger to the corner about 2 o'clock and pull it back to the center, just to compress and flatten the bottom a little bit. Now, what we've done on this side, now we're going to move to this side, because you want your fingernails to catch. All the pressure with the outside fingers, the inside just resist a tiny bit. There's no pressure really pushing out with the inside fingers. And come to the top, it's stuck to the dry clay a little bit there. You've got to try and get to the top before it dries out. And that's all about the speed of the wheel, but also how hard you're pressing. I'm slowing the wheel down as I do this pull now. My little finger of my left hand pushes in just on the rim as I'm coming up. And that's why I got that really narrow, because all the pressure was in, but this little finger was pushing back in just a touch. You've got to watch all your fingers basically. So now I'm going to really dent it by pushing my hand all the way in. And as long as you keep the wheel spinning, it won't really dent the clay. And that's a tendency for beginners to actually stop the wheel every time they let go of the actual pot, so you shouldn't. Push the rim down each time you get to the top. It helps to keep that rim rounded and also level. If you have a little bit off a little bit, you can hide it just by pushing down a touch. Now, I used a little wooden rib to make a foot in the bottom, press it in, and then I turn the other end of the rib and put my finger just there against that corner, and then just press in a touch, and it gives yourself a nice little foot. The metal rib is just to grab the water off the surface, just like that. And then the top corner of the rib, I press in a bit harder to make an indentation, and then I lift it about a 1/4 inch above and do that pressure again, so I end up with that sort of little double. I think it's a traditional beer tanker type edge, and I've done it since my teacher in high school taught me how to do it. Now I'm rounding off with the sponge just to get the water off. And a couple of these little tools you've seen used before. If you want to compress your rim a little bit, you just press down like that. And the rubber band, it's a green rubber band from Laguna Clay Company, thank you Laguna. It replaces the leather, although I use a leather a lot still, because it actually gives you the option to do a really thick rim with the leather. These have obviously been cut, so there's only a certain width you can get through. Alright, there's a mug. Release your piece. I should have a bat to put these on. I'll put it over there so you can still see it. Okay, that's the cylinder type coffee mug. Find a big piece of clay. This is about 2.5 pounds. Round off the bottom a little bit. Notice I dried the wheel before and cleaned it, but leave the piece of clay on. And that actually helps this one stick. Right. Same thing, pressure with your left and your right hand. The top hand presses down hard, just so the piece is solidly stuck to the clay vat, or the plastic vat. That's all about just pressing down to make sure it's stuck and try and get that sort of dome. It actually, sometimes people when they're doing that will end up building a wall on this, but if you want to, you can cone it. On a bigger piece of clay, it's kind of often nice to do this, just to make sure it's nice and even. Watch how the hands are totally connected to each other the whole time you're throwing. Now this is a teapot with a wider base for stability. Now, like the coffee mug, fingers are supported by my left hand, and I feel for the center, press down, then I push a great big pile of water on and push down and pull out all in one motion. Same again, I put my finger across to the outer corner, 2 o'clock-ish, and pull it back into the center. Now, all of this was done on that side of the pot really, so we're now going to move over here and press in. Resist with your left hand fingers just a touch. It's drying pretty quick that time, so before it gets dry you've got to get some more water over there. I'm just getting over the flu. I've had it for about 12 days. It's been going around a lot. There you go. See, it's still narrow, so I'm pressing deep with my outside fingers, resisting with the inside two fingers, and pulling right to the top. I'm trying to keep it narrow so I don't have to collar it at the end. Fingers down. Dig deep again with both fingers this time, so you're trying to get a bit of height. And in a minute I'm going to belly it out. Also, don't like it to be too thin at the top. That's a little wide, so this is the collaring I was talking about. You just want to narrow it just a touch. I'm going to get the water out, and then I'm going to make the form. You've got the height, and I've got a sort of good width at the bottom, but I like teapots to have a nice generous belly. Now I drag that sponge up from the inside all the way up so that it's evenly smooth on the inside. Clean the rib, put my hand in, and just press with your inside fingers against the edge of the rib. So I'm creating that little belly. Tool just to do the foot. I don't trim much at all, and therefore I'm throwing thin, and I try and put a foot on each piece so that I hardly have to do anything to the form. The form actually could be bellied out a little more afterwards as the clay dries out a little bit, but this isn't bad at all. I'm just going to collar that just a touch more. That's a little bit better. There we go, that's rounded it off just nicely. Yeah, it's got a nice round form. So, generous, kind of nice, and the teapot has a bit of a belly. I have this ball of clay here to balance my board so I don't ever make it topple over. Alright, well, what do you need with a teapot? Spout and a lid. So I've got a piece ready for the actual lid. You can use calipers to measure for your lid. I'm pretty good at throwing it and eyeballing it. So the actual knob is in the center there, so I just press down. And then the knob becomes another pot in the center, really. So I push it up. People with arthritis like a nice big handle to grab hold of. So it's a good idea to make this knob easy to grip. And then I use my little finger, push underneath, and draw the wall up a touch, and then the inside finger pushes over the top of the little finger to get you that kind of rim It overhangs a little bit. There's a little bit of water inside there. There's a little decorative thing if you want. You can actually make a little spiral to catch the glaze a little bit there. Now, that part, just for measuring, this part here has to fit inside the hole of the teapot. As I said, I'm not good at eyeballing this stuff, but you should measure it with calipers to make sure that is going to fit. And that's about, I'm lifting it up a touch, so you have about an inch of foot basically to go inside. It's easy to think you have a nice lid and then realize that every time you pour the tea the lid falls off, so make sure you've got a nice deep flange. See what I mean? So it's a nice deep flange. And we need a spout. Now I'm going to make 2 teapots, but that's enough for 2 spouts. Center the clay, push down. If you're making spouts, sometimes it's good to make an extra spout, just in case one of them doesn't feel right for the form when you attach it. You can cut it off and just use a second spare one. Anyway, this time you can press all the way through the clay to the floor, because you are actually making a spout that's going to be just a tube. You've got to keep it narrow by putting all the pressure on with these outside fingers. Collar it because you need height and length for the spout. You don't want to be too thin either. That's now a little wide, so I'll narrow it a touch. Using your needle tool, sometimes you give a little bit of slip inside there to actually, from your finger, so it's good to just roll something up the inside. That spout, I think, is kind of long, but I've got enough clay here to make another one. So I'm going to cut this one off about here. There you go, they release pretty easy. And then compress the rim where you just cut off, and you can start throwing another spout. The second spout tends to have a wider bottom area to it, so I like those better. The narrower tall one will work. I don't know, I sort of like it when they are sort of slightly wider at the bottom and they spread out more over the surface of the pot. Roll it up. These tend to be, you know, onion soup bowl handles or saucepan type handles shapes, so I will fiddle around with it when it's done. But that has a nicer wider bottom area there, so I'm going to cut it off about there. Nice thing about the Shimpo Whisper is it stops quickly. So that's 2 spouts. That's a little short on that one. That's nice, I like that one better. But I have enough clay left. And this was 1/4 pound of clay when I started. So I'll end up with 3 spouts from 1/4 pound. And this one will be a little shorter, but sometimes you don't need much of a length in the spout. Okay, that's not a very nice looking spout. I made it a bit too tall for the third spout. Usually they're shorter. So what you can do, stick this in. You can widen it a little bit just by pushing with the pin to get a little bit extra width on that one. And then I widened it a little too much in one area, so come back in. And that's much nicer. This one I'm just going to cut off right at the back. So I don't need to get the water out because it's going to be falling right out the bottom. There we go. So that's 3 spouts. So let's go for one more teapot and another lid. So I took the clay off that time, but I've dried it out. Round off the bottom of your clay. There's no water on there at all. Bang it down. This clay is 516 from Pottery Supply House. They're situated in a suburb of Toronto. And they sell lots of different clays as well as other manufacturers' clays. So they have Laguna and I think some clay from out west in Canada too, Plainsman clay. So that's collaring, coning, push down. My left arm never leaves that splash band edge. I want a wide base for the teapot. There we go. Wet it nicely, push down, pull out while it's still wet. Slow the wheel down a touch. The speed of the wheel is easy to forget. So you've got to throw by repetition. You'll get used to feeling that, okay, oh, I forgot to slow the wheel down. And it becomes a lot easier when you're actually pulling a wall if the wheel's going a bit slower. So move to this side. The wheel is now going only about a quarter to half speed. Now the clay dries out fast, so let go before you really drag it off center. The harder you press, the faster the clay will dry out. So we need a tall wall. So this time I've wet it nicely and I'm pushing deep. And remember to chase the wet spot, so if it ever feels a little bit dry, you've got to go a little faster to get up to the wet bit above your fingers. Now it's also easy to forget and drag one of your fingers. These are the two that are actually doing the pull, so don't touch the clay with that one because you're drying the clay out a little bit with your first finger before your other fingers get to it. So pull up. This one's got a nice sized top, but I will cone it a little bit later on. Collar it, should say. Now I'm going to drag my metal tool up the outside next, so I'm going to make sure that the inside is the same lubricant, water surface on the inside of the pole all the way up so my fingers don't stick anywhere. So this rib is going to just lightly touch and the inside fingers will press out a tiny bit to give me that rounded belly. there's a lot of different things you can do. So every time you make a pot, you have to make some sort of decision in your head what you want it to look like. Because this one's got a shoulder almost as far as being rounded, and I could make that shoulder curve in or suddenly go flat. There you go. Now it's got wider because my arm was touching, so basically narrow it back in a bit. I could also make that a bit taller. And make sure there's no surface water left on your piece. The inside I know is fairly dry because I was running my fingers up through there as well. There's my foot, so I don't have to trim. Slightly different shape. This one definitely has a shoulder, the other one has a slight curve. There's no water left on the inside. There's a little bit of slip on the rim, so the rubber band will pull that off, and also this clay has no grog in it, so it's almost not necessary to compress the rim anyway. These bats that I'm using were cut out of I found a couple of times in my career I found places that they were doing rooms in hotels and they were just cutting out circles in countertops, and they make perfect bats. So keep your eyes open for renovations or actual new construction, because you might get some free bats out of it. This is a particle board bat, which I varnished the hell out of. Basically it's not submerged in varnish, but I really water the varnish down and make sure that, do that in the summertime too, it stinks. But if you want to just, any kind of wooden laminate type surface, just varnish it with marine varnish really well. Oh gosh, I've had these over 10 years, so they've lasted a good time. Okay, a lid. We just need a lid for this one since we had spouts already thrown. There you go. So remember, the knob's already in there. It's like a sculpture almost. You're just trying to reveal the actual knob. Press down. Before it dries out, let go. Put a little water in. There's your knob. I can hear the wind picking up. I'm not sure if you can. This building is right on the water, so the wind howls underneath me, all around me, and I can hear the waves coming underneath the building. But later on we're supposed to get some big wind, plus some ice rain and some snow this evening. But we've been lucky so far. It's the end of the 2019 and we still don't have any serious snow. And so I use my little finger, my first finger, my left hand, to form that little flange. And I know that will fit in there, but I'm going to widen it just a touch. After you've thrown hundreds of pots, you'll be able to do all this stuff without measuring. I actually went to a workshop with John Leach years ago, and he was doing that, and I couldn't do it at that time, but you know, it just comes with experience. Alright, so there you go. Take it off, just put some water around. Cut through. It should release the first time. I didn't do a spiral on the inside of that one. I have a stamp as well that I can create that spiral, or anything else, because I have hundreds of stamps. Alright, I think that's enough for try and keep my videos fairly short. Okay, so basically I will continue the clay recycling. I only really need to post one more video on that, but the whole reason for doing that is to give people a bit of a business look at the fiscal part of whether you recycle clay or whether you don't. And I'll talk about that in the next video, how much this has actually cost me to actually recycle this clay. Alright, thank you for joining me. It's still stormy. Basically, I can give you a quick look. The waves are kind of no white caps at the moment, you know, but it's looking bad. Alright, thanks very much. Bye.